Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Erickson Alumni Center. For those of you, this is your first Shale Gas Networking Forum. You're in for a treat. We'll have a couple talks here by some faculty members at WVU. We're pleased to welcome to WVU in recent years, well, in recent months and over the last year, specifically in this shale gas utilization mountain of excellence. And I work very closely with our first speaker, John who was just hired on January 25th as the first Statler Chair in natural gas utilization. But I did want to update you on some of the things that are going on campus, both in the upstream and the downstream area. In upstream research, many of you have been here before, have heard about the Marcellus Shale Energy and Environment Laboratory, headed by Tim Carr. The PI on that, the director of the Marcellus Shale Energy and Environment Laboratory, and the department chair in geology and geography. And that MCL well was successfully drilled and completed in the fall. The gas is being produced from those wells, and over this winter, if you turned on a gas stove or turned on a gas furnace in Morgantown, then you were using the natural gas that was produced from the two production wells here in Morgantown. And many of you in the room were involved in that project. See, Mike McCauley was heading up some air emissions work, and actually I guess that was about it in the room. But it was a very comprehensive project, one of the first of its kind in the world to do a transparent shale gas production well. And this was funded by the Department of Energy and in collaboration with Northeast Natural Energy and Schlumberger, and so there's a lot of science behind that particular well, and we're now just dealing with all the data that's coming back from that. Another project also led by Tim Carr is called Infuse, and Tim, you're going to have to forgive me, I can't remember the full acronym. It's the International Forum for Unconventional and Sustainable Energy, I think is actually it. But that's a Department of State project that's really a very, very interesting project where government officials from around the world are coming to WVU to learn how it is that the United States both produces shale and produces it in an environmentally friendly way, and what policy frameworks we have in the United States and in West Virginia specifically. And so our first cohort came from Mexico a little over a month ago. We have cohorts coming from Colombia and Morocco soon, and some others that are yet to be named and announced. But this is a program that the Department of State is running through its Energy Bureau, reaching out around the world and trying to assist other governments in being able to regulate, permit, and encourage responsible and environmentally friendly shale development around the world. Another project to announce is a project that's being led by Doug Patchen and his group in the NRCCE on studying the options for ethane storage in the Appalachian Basin. This has come up of interest because of all the successes in the upstream and how we can produce natural gas and natural gas liquids very effectively and when I say effectively, I mean cheaply, very low costs. And what that has done in this particular region is created a glut in the amount of natural gas and natural gas liquids that John will speak to here in a little bit. But one of the key infrastructure development needs is a spot market for the trading of natural gas and liquids in this region. And so funded in part by the Benedum Foundation with a $100,000 grant from the Benedum Foundation and some pending matching funds from the industry. Doug and a team of geologists from the West Virginia Geologic Survey and the Pennsylvania and Ohio Geologic Surveys will be studying options for ethane and natural gas liquid storage in this region. That's a key component of some infrastructure development that was put in. The ball was started rolling by the three governors' announcements back in October in collaboration in infrastructure, research, common marketing package, and workforce development. And this is really the cornerstone of that infrastructure development piece. There was also an accompanying amendment to both the Senate and House energy bills in Washington, asking the Department of Energy to conduct similar studies on the potential for storage of natural gas liquids in the region. So these are the major announcements and some of the efforts that we have ongoing on campus. And I want to leave the rest of the time and stop talking and allow Paolo and John some time to tell you about what their efforts are here on campus. And so I'll start with an introduction to John, and I'll introduce Paolo here in a little bit. But John Hu comes to us as the first, WVU's first Statler Endowed Faculty Chair in engineering, specifically in natural gas utilization, as the director of the Shale Gas Center to help coordinate the natural gas utilization mountain of excellence here on campus. So John started on January 25th of this year, as I mentioned, and he's an experienced scientist and engineer with a proven track record across his career of inventing and developing and commercializing innovative research, specifically in the area of oil and gas. And so John will lead the creation of this Shale Gas Center within the Energy Institute over the next few months, and he's already gotten a great head start on that. John joins us from Koch Industries, where he was charged in the research division of Koch for identifying future technological growth areas in petrochemicals and catalytic and biological engineering and developing R&D strategies for commercialization. He also supervised industrial funded research at U.S.-based universities funded by Koch and national labs and R&D institutions. Before he joined Koch, he was at Black & Veatch, where he's an R&D manager. Before that, he was also at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, one of the DOE's national laboratories, where he was a research manager there working on some gas to liquids technologies, among other things. And he was also a lead refinery engineer with BP. So you see he has a mixture of research and national lab and industrial experience coming to WVU. So I think we're very, very lucky to have John here on campus. His PhD's in chemical engineering from Tsinghua University in China. He has an MBA from Washington State University, and he did a postdoc, unfortunately, at the University of Pittsburgh, just up the road, but we'll forgive him for that. But he was in one of the leading laboratories in catalysis science at the University of Pittsburgh. So, John, I'll hand it over to you, and we look forward to hearing your comments.
Thanks, Dr. Anderson, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the WVU, the research office, and also NRCC to organize this. This is the first time I give a presentation in this forum. Today I'm going to, in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to talk about the shale gas conversion to fuels and chemicals. As Dr. Anderson mentioned, it's going to be the downstream of shale gas, the production. So the converting the shale gas and into the fuels and chemicals via the process intensification, particularly modular production. So the first, let me introduce my shale gas team. WVU Shale Gas Center, which is within the Energy Institute, led by Dr. Anderson. So actually, I'm working very closely with him. And in fact, we just came back from travel to China. It's a US-China shale gas workshop. So I'm going to talk about what we learned from the China shale gas. So my team consists of a total of 9 faculties, including myself. And then some of the faculties are in this room. I really appreciate you attend this forum. And these faculties include the chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, and also the law school and finance and the policy. So the first, what I'm planning to do in this shale gas center, well, there are several focus areas. In engineering science focus area, so there are several downstream product line we are going to develop. So which means how we utilize shale gas, converting to the chemicals, transportation fuels, and also fuel cells and the NGL vehicles and the power, co-firing the shale gas and coal. So I don't want to confuse people. People talk about shale gas, natural gas. Essentially, chemical nature are the same. It's methane. So and true, there are some other material, NGL. Other focus area, which I'm also working closely with the faculties who are sitting in this room, they are policy, environmental, and legal and economics. Dr. Anderson and I just came back from a trip in China. So here's what we learned shale gas in China. We actually visit a shale, the PetroChina shale gas, the drilling site in a remote area called the Sichuan province. It's in the mountain. And currently, PetroChina has drilled 50 wells and 33 in operation. So on their daily production is 3 million cubic meters per day. And then currently, when they drill the shale gas, all they are using the shale gas is just for the local, regional as natural gas. So basically, they just burn the gas. There's no utilization, which means there's no conversion to chemicals or transportation fuel. So they haven't thought about it. Even on the drilling side, they are really far behind the US. So that's good. I mean, they are learning from us. I think the Dr. Anderson, expressed the interest of inviting them to visit Marcellus, the shale gas field. The Chinese government has been focusing on environmental regulation, and actually very interesting. Just by the time I left the Yibin, the workshop side, 5 Chinese government, federal Chinese central government, EPA person approached me. They want my contact information. Now they connect me with some kind of a fancy, it's not LinkedIn, it's called WeChat. So they really want to get information on how US regulate the shale gas. So that's pretty interesting. And also the policy. Producers in China require the government to put incentives. For example, some producers saying that, oh, we can convert natural gas in LNG, but give us an incentive. Because the cost of the production in China is more expensive than in the US. I don't know why. I think Qin Yun from the US-China, the Clean Coal Center is sitting behind. He and I, we approach PetroChina, we challenge them, why you guys produce a well costs you more than $10 million per well, which is twice as much as in US. And it would take only 7 days for us to drill well. It took them like a month. So we don't know. So they have their own justification on why $10 million each well, but I'm not going to, I don't think I believe them. So anyway, my personal experience by working in the Barkin, when I work at the coke industry, we did a study at the Barkin. You know, Barkin is another shale gas field. In the Barkin, they produce oil. However, 1/3 of production is gas. They can't do anything but burn the gas. While we are speaking, there are 2,700 well, they just burn, flare. So according to CMU, we went to CMU Energy Week last week, and this data from CMU, they say that every day, every month, the Barkin, they burn $100 million worth of the gas. So the study I did back in the coke industry, I took a team to go there to see what we can do. So if you look at the satellite, the view, here's the Barkin, and here's the night view, of a city. So it's pretty much scattered, the flare. So immediately people think, oh, let's build a pipeline. Yeah, go ahead and do it. 300 miles, connect them together. I call that spider web. The spider web, the pipeline, costs $2 billion. Industry has that money. For example, coke industry, Dow Chemical, they can put $2 billion together. Then when you put the $2 billion in, what you end up with, I will show you a production curve. The production curve will be like this. Flare gas is like this. After probably the 24 or 30 months, it's gone. So you build pipeline and then get into production. Then 2 years later, what do? You move the pipeline or you close the pipeline, build a new one because the wells keep on moving. And then the life of the PetroChina, the shale gas, even shorter. It's like 12 months. So every 12 months, they have to close one well. So basically, what we learned with so much of the shale gas and what we can do. Okay, let me give you some background of currently people are doing in so-called gas to liquid. So what do we learn from the world's first gas to liquid plant? This is the Shale oil Qatar, the plant in Qatar. So look at the data. It's 140,000 barrels per day, the daily production, the liquid, and it took them 10 years, starting from 2003 and fully operational. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't read this side. Fully productional in 2012. It took them 12 years or 10 years to build and $24 billion. The point I try to make is, okay, if you have money, If you have gas, which means you have enough pipeline, and also somebody give you gas for free, go for it. Build large GTL pipeline. Then the question is, what if you don't have pipeline? And then there's something to think about it. For stranded gas, what's the definition of stranded gas? Stranded gas means either your production is not good enough to supply a reasonable conventional gas pipeline, or you never build a pipeline to ship gas out. The place, the PetroChina place we went, I mean, the brand can tell you, it took us like 3 hours bus, and then the driving around the mountain. On the left-hand side is a cliff, on the right-hand side is a cliff, or sometimes it just think about how you build a pipeline. So I mean, by definition, that's called stranded gas. You cannot ship it out within a limited time, 5 or 10 years, then you need to do something with it. So that's the strand. So we need to think about how we deal with the so-called gas that the pipeline is not available. The concept I'm going to push, or not I'm going to push, the industry is pushing is the so-called the wellhead modular production. So this is a modular which you can ship on the fire engine truck, and then the ship to wellhead. When you get into production, and then I'm talking about this is a small module among this. So modular is not one unit operation, it's a multi-unit operation strategically or synergistically integrating together to achieve production. I'm going to focus my presentation on the so-called intensification modular production. So the point that I want to make it here is if you have modular portable production, put on wellhead, get in production, when the well that is depleted, you move the production module rather than pipeline. So build pipeline, moving pipeline is going to cost you money, cost you a lot of effort. Even the legal, the people can tell you, you have to go through all the permitting. Yeah. So anyway, so what is the process intensification? Before I discuss about the modular production, I want to highlight what's the process intensification. Well, I did Google and also checked the literature. There are two things in the process intensification. First, the technology has to be unique. So that means you have to produce for a given volume of the production capacity, you produce more than conventional. That's what I mean by the decreasing equipment size, production capacity ratio. So that's the key. And then don't forget the other one, so the efficiency. So when you have a process intensification, so you want to reduce energy consumption by doing either you call the heat management or the efficiency of the conversion. So the features unique of the production that allow you to produce more for the per unit volume, and also the achieving energy saving. So that's the process intensification. And then I've tried to use my own understanding on the process intensification. I'm chemical engineer, so when you deal with production, there are three things you need to worry. One is the reaction, and heat management inside the reactor, and the separation. So if you can combine all the three together and then make it work, and then to achieve the synergistic effect, that's production. So commonly, when people in the industry, when people put two units together, they say, oh, 1 + 1 = 2. Well, that's not right. Sometimes they got 1.5. Now, in the process intensification, when you put two units together, integrate them together, you should achieve more than 2. So that's the challenge of process intensification. It's easier to say, but it's a challenge to put them together. So when I was at the PetroChina site, I talked to them and saying that, hey guys, you put a pipeline, you only ship locally, not within like 50 miles, and then the local people just burn it. So what do you do if you keep on expanding? Actually, one of the concepts we developed back in North Dakota is so-called satellite production. Satellite production means if you have each drilling well, you produce a high-value liquid, let's say the diesel, and then you transport by truck and ship to a central location, and then ship it out. So that's a typical the satellite production mode, and also the bi-modular. You put a module in each of the production well. So I did a quick calculation when I was on the site. For PetroChina, the shale gas, they produce, each well produce like 90,000 cubic meter per day. So if you do the conversion, I don't think you need to go through it. So pretty much they produce 45 tons per day, each well. So each truck like this, you can carry 26 tons. So 2 trucks per day per well is easy to handle. So basically, you just spin around with the truck, get the liquid, convert the gas to liquid using modular production, ship them out. So that's the concept of modular production. So what's the advantage of modular production? In the world of engineering, when people scale up the process, they start from small, laboratory, pilot, demonstration, go to commercial. Every time that you go through like maybe 10 times, 20 times to go. That's the common sense, which means you have to do slow. You can't jump from laboratory to commercial. You have to do step by step. Well, modular production is different concept. What's the modular production is, you basically develop the module, which is production. But you want to achieve the full production, you just multiply. It's more like a mobile home. You build it, you put it on the site, and connect them together. It's a scale-out concept versus scale-up. So that's the modular production, and I'm going to tell you the recent news announcement. Dr. Anderson sent me this news announcement. I just highlight methanol plant coming to Marcellus. Primus Energy build a 160 tons per day. That's a small unit. So the background information is currently Primus Green Energy is on one of the WVU, the EPSCO, the proposal, the team. So they are basically manufacture, development technology, modular production. And here's another highlight. So everybody says, if you do the modular, you lose the economy of scale. That's true or not true? When I say that's not true, is if you compare with the mature technology, ethylene cracker, yes, go for it, large scale, the larger the better. However, if you deal with the new technology, for example, natural gas to high-value chemicals, benzene, toluene, xylene, nobody has done those before, converting natural gas to high-value chemicals, then you need to be careful because there's no economy of scale. Because economy of scale means you have to go through the risk, you have to go through this, whereas modular, you minimize risk. So it's kind of trade-off. So if you look at the statement the Primus, the energy made, as a result, the system are cost competitive to a world-class methanol plant. Methanol is a mature technology, and then several industry company provide technology. So Primus build a small scale and still economical. So that made you think the advantage of modular for something else. I want to share you my experience. I'm not going to go through this again. And so back to 10 years ago, during my research time, we did a project for NASA. So the NASA project means mission to Mars. Mission to Mars means you go to Mars, and then you have one-way ticket, which means you have carry one-way fuel to Mars. And then on Mars, you have to produce the fuels on the way back to the Earth. So the modular device we developed for the NASA is really a 3-unit operation. It's a CO2 absorption and the reaction and all in one. So that's a modular production. The good news 10 years ago is NASA does not care about the cost because it's NASA. So and then we developed a device, and this device you can see it's just like it's a pencil size. It costs you $100,000. Everybody's eyes wide open. Yeah, you can do this only for NASA. You can't do anything for the industry. It was true 10 years ago, but I kept on telling people, do not let current manufacturer capability limit your thinking. So what point I try to make? Today, let me back up. So when you design this modular device, with what even today's machinery, you cannot machine this. The 3-unit operation, the channel go this way, the channel go that way. So current machinery, you cannot build this. How do we make this? You have to have good, solid geometry, the thinking to design this. Then what you do is you change this 3-dimension design to 2-dimension. It's a known technology called shim fabrication. So which means you use computer software to slice your design into 2 dimensions, then you build it. So that was 10 years ago we did. Guess what? Today, 3D printing. You don't have to do this. You can do 3D printing and print this device. I visited EPA lab in Research Triangle. All those guys, they are really developing some 3D printing. They print a sensor, and which costs them $100,000 each sensor, not only probably costs them like a fraction of that. So the point I'm trying to make is that all this modular design and process intensification with the 3D printing or new machinery, new technology, we can revolutionarily change the world. So anyway, so finally, let me highlight the research development at WVU. So one of our approach we are doing now is we try to demonstrate modular concept at wellhead. So for example, as a university, we are not going to build the full scale, the production line. So let's say what if we build 1/10 of size of modular, and then we are going to build at the wellhead. Immediate opportunity will be, so we are going to have some kind of module put at the wellhead, Marcellus wellhead, to make transportation fuels and to make chemicals and the fuel cells. And then the most importantly, we will have the undergraduate student, graduate student who work on this module, and then at wellhead to learn, and then eventually become the engineers in the future. So I probably speak too much, and then I will leave something for discussion. Thank you.
So we'll have time for a discussion. We'll have Paolo and John up front, and you can ask questions for both of them. So I want to introduce, as we shift a little toward the policy side, Professor Paolo Ferrari. Paolo joined us in 2014. I didn't realize it had been that long ago. I think it was the fall of 2014, right? As one of these members dedicated to shale gas studies. He's an expert in interaction among trade and economic globalization, sustainable development, energy, environment, and human rights, with a special focus on China and other Asian countries. He's an editor-in-chief for 2 book series by Routledge Publishing, and has published 3 books and more than 40 articles in journals, and presented his work at more than 80 international conferences. He's serving as a book editor for energy policy, legal, and social economic issues under the dimensions of sustainability and security. And he served as a guest editor for the Journal of World Energy Law and Business, entitled Sustainable Energy and National Security, Arbitration and Negotiation Issues. But his latest work will be very interesting and well, I mean, not that the others aren't interesting too, but very related to what John just spoke about, is a comparison between shale gas in China, unconventional fuel development in the United States, health, water, environment, and sustainable development, which will be coming out soon in the Brooklyn Journal of International Law. So if I were to list all the different degrees that Paolo has, we'd be here for a little while longer, but to mention, he has a JD in International and European Law from Paris West University, Nanterre La Défense, an LLM in European Legal Studies from the College of Europe in Bruges, Belgium, and dual PhD degrees in International Law from Aix-Marseille in France, and the University of Milan Doctoral School. And so he's also a fellow at the International Economic Law Institute at Georgetown University. See, there's lots of international experience, and again, we're lucky to have Paolo here on faculty, and we're lucky to catch him in the country this week as well. And so I'll turn it over to Paolo. Do you have slides?
Yeah.
Okay. Here, we'll get you up.
So thank you very much, Brian, for this introduction, and thank you to Trina for the great organization of this event. It was great to participate, to attend the events, and it's also great to be from the other side. And I'm also very pleased that John Hu became chair, so we are starting now to work all together, and this is great because we needed really to have a person with the experience of John to work together on science, law, and policy, and this is a wonderful news for all of us. As Brian said, I moved here a couple of years ago. Before I've been living for 5 years in China, and also I was teaching in UK and in Italy previously, and I was focusing this research project I was developing in China on sustainable energy investments and the relation between sustainability, economic development, environment, and sustainable energy. So this paper on China shale gas development is part of this broader project with a collaboration with Chinese institutions, and for the results are forthcoming. This paper specifically, we decide to develop. I decided to develop this paper in the framework of this bigger project because of the interesting development in China. Brian and John, they were there just until a few days ago. I was there as well over the spring break to keep being updated about the developments. Just to go straight to the topic, this is a very simplified map on global shale gas basin top reserve orders, and as you can see, China is definitely in the first position as potential shale gas development. That is going to happen. That's of course something that we are going to discover, and the fundamental part besides science is also what is going to happen in terms of regulation and policy from the Chinese government side, and what is going to happen also from the civil society side as well. This is, of course, a very simplified, and I'm not going to spend any time about this because I suppose that I'm here among experts. So, from a policy and geopolitics perspective, an important element is how natural gas became a game changer. From a policy and legal perspective, game changer is the fact that in terms of politics and law, certain countries might become more energy independent or less energy dependent, and would change from the other side the geopolitical relation among countries. So if Europe is able to become more independent thanks to the shale gas development, needs to rely less on Qatar or Russia or other countries that would prefer to have less influence from a political perspective. But as also a game changer in terms of global energy, considering the fact that in science and in experts believe that shale gas has also very relevant elements, positive elements, in terms of the fact that shale gas is considered more clean than burning coal, is more efficient, and it's also helping better supply. The supplementary element to be considered is it's really the natural gas might be a bridge fuel from coal to renewable energy. But a very relevant reasoning here is to consider whether much investment in natural gas development would convince, also because of the economic crisis, also because of budget constraints and cuts, convince governments to invest more in natural gas and reduce the investment in renewable energy. And in certain countries, it's happening. This is again, a simplified map of the shale natural gas basins in China, and John was referring, and also Brian, to the visits they did in Sichuan and in other areas. Of course, there are concerns. It's a very important possibility for China in terms of economic development, in terms of energy independence, but which are the potential risks in terms of geological risks, in terms of environmental risks, in terms of water risks. Of course, in the presentation of today, I'm not going to focus mainly on the upstream market, but more on the downstream market. But in the paper that is forthcoming, both the sides are analyzed. So which are the obstacles to natural gas development in China? The main obstacles are related to the non-integrated national gas grid in China, the constraints on foreign investors, so considering that China needs to have a lot of foreign support to develop good technology, and technology that it's able to reduce the cost, as John was saying, how it's possible that the cost of the whales are so high. I suppose that probably John was raising the issue is everything is done correctly according to the rules or not. But there are also other concerns in terms of whether the technology that the Chinese companies and the Chinese government own is sufficient to develop good market in the field and correct procedures to avoid potential environmental hazards. So when constraints on foreign investors are there, and this is not a problem just on shale gas, it's a problem in many other areas, even though for the last 15 years the Chinese law and regulation has changed a lot exactly because of the participation of China to the World Trade Organization, and many improvements have been developed in terms of stabilizing the law and regulation in China according to the international standards and according to the international trade rules. Still many fields, many areas are covered by limits to foreign investors expressly because the Chinese government wants to protect the internal market, protecting the internal market from foreign competitors, from the global competition, and I can mention other areas like banking, financial services is not only on shale gas, but of course banking and financial services are also very important to develop potential infrastructure or financial system for foreign companies to invest in China, including in the area of the shale gas development. The third constraint is also the geological one. We are very lucky to have in West Virginia such important projects coordinated by Tim Carr and also by other people in West Virginia, in particular the one on transparency project. But the expertise and experience we have in US is not ultimately and easily transferable to China because the geological context is very different. So we need to take in consideration also these potential risks that in China are there, not only for geological challenges, but also for geological challenges. Geological challenges in the sense that the areas where the natural gas basins are located in China, they are also very connected to areas of risk of earthquake and other relevant potential environmental hazards. Which are the potential for international trade in the liquefied natural gases? So if we look to the downstream market, we can immediately perceive a certain constraints, the transport cost, the cost of the establishing a liquefied natural gas export-import processing facilities that are of course very relevant if we want to start to import or export natural gas. This is something that probably several states in US might be able to do, but still those concerns are there. And when China is concerned, this is even higher because of the reasons I explained before in terms of limits for foreign investors and foreign companies to involve directly in the market. For having China engaging in natural gas trade, we need free trade agreements. So it's under negotiation different free trade agreements between Europe and US, and in the public speeches and in the public position of Obama was also very supportive of the potential inclusion in the TTIP, in the transatlantic trade and investment partnership between Europe and US, the potential trade in natural gas. But of course the transport costs are there and the cost of establishing export-import processing facilities are there, but having the free trade agreements, in this case with China, it's necessary to be able to proceed in this economic and financial development. Increasing the liquefied natural gas imports from US and China, as I said before, might substantially diminish Europe's reliance on Russia and Qatar, with a very important geopolitical consequences. So when transport cost, when cost of establishing exporting processing facilities, when free trade agreements are there are also those other concerns that might be very important for countries. So they certain countries might be even willing to spend more if this means less influence for political concern from countries that they are, for the moment, their top list of suppliers of energy. What about the current Chinese law related to shale gas, but not only to shale gas? In this research that I'm developing, I have analyzed with a team of colleagues from the Chinese Research Academy of Environmental Science, also the Chinese water environmental management towards institutional integration. In this paper, that it's a paper that looks into specifically the institutional fragmentation, we try to demonstrate how institutional fragmentation in China create several problems in terms of environmental protection and environmental standards, because the institution, even at central government level in China, they do not collaborate. There are competing interests among the Ministry of Environmental Protection, the NRDC, and the Water Resources, the Ministry of Water Resources, or the Ministry of Health. So all these governmental at central level, they need also to relate at local level, at province level. And when they do relate with other provinces, it's often very problematic in the relation because of the diverging objective and diverging interest at institutional level. So this is called institutional fragmentation that creates ultimately very big problems from many different levels in terms of research and in natural science. Scientists, there are the different departments at governmental level, they have double spending or even more than twice, 3, 4 times to collect exactly the same data, but to reach completely different objective and results. So sometimes this data conflict. And the current Chinese law and policy are not able to solve this, in the sense that there are a lack of coordination of those regulations, and there are also lack of coordination of overlapping competencies. Why there are these overlapping competencies? If we look to the development in terms of institutional fragmentation, the Ministry of Environmental Protection is the most recent one of creation in China, and so it's gradually taking over of certain responsibilities, but it's still not clear which are certain overlapping competence belongs to the Ministry of Environmental Protection or to other ministries. As regard the potential environmental hazards for gas production, there are currently no Chinese law directly addressing these issues, but there are other laws that can be used to cover these loopholes, and specifically the water law that require cooperative federalism, and the mineral resources law that it's also very, very important in China. Consider that the mineral resources and the other raw materials belongs to the state according to the Chinese constitution, to the central state. What about the enforcing of these laws? So we might detect that in the Chinese law and regulation there is a mismatch between what is an adopted law and the enforcement of the law in itself. On the environmental area, we had very important developments recently, starting from 1st of January 2015, the new Chinese environmental law has been adopted and entered into force, and give much more possibility to civil society organization to intervene, to open class actions against potential environmental risk and pollution by industries. And this was an important development in a country as China, where the information and the lack of information and lack of enforcement was quite relevant in many areas, and still now is still very relevant in the environmental area. But we need to recognize and to acknowledge that much of the development in the Chinese law and regulation has happened recently, covering two main areas, environmental law and also labor law, in terms of civil society concerns. If we look to specifically to the environmental protection law, the environmental protection law delegates responsibility to the regional supervision centers to be able to control in provinces. So the central government demand and delegate the regional supervision centers of controlling the enforcement of the environmental law in China. But there are central and local governmental information asymmetry, exactly for the reason I was saying before, that there are diverging objectives among the authorities. Sometimes these regional supervision centers are underfunded and are overloaded with work. There are conflict of interest and complicity with the funding local government, that probably what John was referring before, and lack of enforcement authority as well. What about the transparency? Transparency is a key aspect here in the WVU projects, but is also a very promising role in China. It was very promising before the accession of China to the World Trade Organization for many areas, for administrative law, for constitutional law, for many different areas, including the topic we are dealing with today. So, as I said before, the new environmental law give stronger possibilities to the public to access to information, and this is very important in terms of raising local awareness and encouraging polluters to self-regulate and bridge the gap between central and local regulation. And now there is a mandatory disclosure of environmental information. Of course, this level of disclosure is different in the different provinces and might be different because not all the time, as I said before, the regional supervision centers do enforce those laws and regulations. So sometimes industries do not do what they are supposed to do, even though the law requires certain minimum standards. They do not comply with that, or the information is not fully delivered. Which are the barriers for entry and uncertainties of the environmental policy? So there is a vague and inconsistent regulatory framework, and this creates uncertainties for overseas investors and energy firms, because this is very true everywhere in the world. So investor wants stability, wants to plan, wants to have foreseeable risks. When the context, the legal and policy context is not clear enough, this creates disincentive for companies to enter into the market. And as I said before, I do believe that not for financial reason, but more for technical reason, more for technical assistance, as Brian mentioned before. I do believe that China needs a lot of external foreign support for being able to face the technical challenges for developing the natural gas market. But if the uncertainty for overseas investors and foreign industries is very high, this is going to be very difficult to be happening. The barriers for entry for small and large firms into the shale gas industries are very evident. There is an absence of competition in the energy market, which generates an unfair allocation of resources. And there is, again, uncertainty of environmental policies, because even though, as I say before, there is this new law and regulation adopted, entering into force in 2015, it's not clear how accurate the environmental risk assessment has to be done for any of these projects. And again, it's changed according to the authorities you are specifically dealing with. Then another matter that regards very important areas for the downstream market is the fiscal regime and the pricing regime. This part in the paper forthcoming is analyzed, but actually it was already a 60-70 pages paper long. I was not able to go into deep details on these aspects, but it will be probably a spin-off paper, because it's a very important field, and I would actually like and seek for collaboration into the shale gas team with the people in the economics and finance, because those issues are very relevant. And the current fiscal regime in China is generally discouraging multinational companies, because it's supporting mainly Chinese industries and not foreign industries. And according to the trade and WTO rules, the same support has to be given also to foreign companies to avoid discrimination in entering into the market. The pricing regime, and I'm going now to conclude very quickly, the pricing regime is also very important in terms of governmental intervention and monopoly energy prices, because of the fact that it does not reflect the scarcity of the resources and the demand in the market. So there is a price distortion against the efficiency and the allocation of the resources, and still the subsidies to the energy industries are not sufficient. And from the other side, when they are sufficient, there is a big financial burden on the state. So for shale gas, currently there are experimental pricing mechanisms in China, and there are also preferential taxation policies, which are unfortunately for the moment not enough. So much work on this would be envisageable for helping the Chinese government to adopt regulation even in the field of fiscal and pricing regimes that would help foreign industries and even domestic industries to invest more and more in the market. And on this point, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm of course totally open to any question you would like to raise. Thank you.
If I ask John to join you,
yeah,
Paulo here at the table, we'll open the floor for questions. Yeah, Eric.
I have a question for John.
I don't have time to open the architecture of a modular device. Actually, think about it. If you have 3 unit operation, if you are familiar, unit operation means if you go to plant, there are so many unit operation. Let's say you have a reactor, you have a heat exchanger, then you have so-called separation. Okay, so that's a 3 unit operation. Conventionally, when you go to the refinery, you have them lay out nicely. It has to be like maybe 10-20 feet away. You got one to one. Now that's just conventional layout. When you do modular, you have to put the 3 things together. For example, inside the reactor, there's a heat exchanger, so going in. So then your separation probably on the bottom reactor. So you think about you massage 3 things together into one. So the productivity for 1 unit, when I say 1 unit, 1 cubic feet. Conventionally, they don't care about the space because you are such open. Refinery is miles long. Now, when you go to modular at the wellhead, first your module has to be transported by truck. So you are limited by the volume and the weight. So your reactor, basically the productivity should be like let's say per cubic feet should be 1,000 times, I made it up, more than conventional. So that's the modular device. Has to be, that's why when people talk about modular, you have to first talk about process intensification. So you have to intensify the process, make sure your production efficiency increase, your energy saving achieve. That's at minimum 2 things you need to achieve.
Is it used primarily?
One application is called stranded gas. Stranded gas doesn't have to be shale gas. Any place you found the gas, you cannot ship it out, it's stranded. So you can do that. Or your production is not worth you to put pipeline. When you put in pipeline, you are talking about billion cubic feet per day. If you only have a couple million cubic feet per day, per while, you better off have something smaller. Otherwise, a pipeline costs you money, costs you time, but there's a value for those gas. So you convert it to liquid, at wellhead, you ship them out. So that's So liquid, keep in mind, it's easier to ship the liquid and the solid, but the gas has to be pipeline. You can't ship the gas out. Well, it's for the modular production, the environmental health and safety is the same as the conventional refinery. In fact, many modular production, you actually want to achieve so-called zero discharge. Means you don't want to have a waste generated. Then when you move the module, then you leave a wastewater pond. That's not the way to go. So you have an environmental permitting issue. You do need some kind of environmental so-called air emission control. But on the liquid side, you don't want to leave. When you finish when the well depleted, when you move module to the next well, you certainly don't want to leave the waste, solid liquid waste behind. That's not the concept, because then what you're doing, you basically every time you move, you have kind of the trash behind. That's not good.
What
So
about
it has to be
worker
zero
safety?
discharge.
And then what about worker safety? too?
Oh, well, work safety, actually, I would say it's probably the most safer than what you call that, than the conventional, because you kind of put them in such a compact way. I would say it's minimized or reduced.
The level of automation is higher too.
Yeah. So.
Dick?
Well, I appreciate your comment about what in particular.
So thank you for the question. Yes, that's one of the major concerns regarding the second questions on the natural gas development in Sichuan Basin, because of the previous geological track records and the big earthquake that it happened. So there are, of course, many environmental concerns, and environmentalism is growing, as I mentioned before, in China. So there are more and more civil society organizations that they are having concerns. But mainly for the moment, the disputes that have been started has been developed mainly on the air pollution or water pollution area, not something connected to specifically to the shale gas. Regarding the other part of the questions, of course, it's very important the geographical location where the basins are, and also that's a similar problem we had with another completely different issues, but still related to trade and still related to natural resources, with raw materials and the rare earth development, which were very important also for renewable energy technology. We had even disputes, and with Trina we were speaking about having a round table on trade dimension of natural resources and the raw materials and the rare earth disputes at the WTO, bringing China for the use of natural resources not according to the trade rules, has created a lot of concerns. Why I'm raising this matter here, that following the loss of the cases of China at the international level, China started to create from the small, medium enterprises that they were controlling the different areas all around China of raw materials and rare earth, to create a big giant company. Why? Because having 3 or 4 or 5 big companies, it was easier for the government, for the central government to control then the use and the exploitation and exploration of those natural resources. So I guess that something similar might happen also for natural gas and shale gas in China. It's a topic that I'm trying to develop with some colleagues, some Chinese counterparts about this, because that would create much more possibility for the Chinese government to control, even though it's peripheric. Many of those basins are peripheric, and as I said before, even though China is a unified country, there is a lot of problems to control for Beijing, to control all the areas, including the natural resources, exploration as it happened for raw materials and rare earth. So I guess that this will be something very relevant to see how it will change the context in the Chinese context on this area.
And Dick, further to your question, in the Sichuan Basin, they've been producing natural gas in the Sichuan Basin for quite a while, but not the unconventional shales. And so the 33 wells that John mentioned that that CNPC has currently producing, that gas is all used very locally within a matter of a few tens of miles, 30 miles or so is the pipeline distribution, because the level of production has not been raised enough really to create a major distribution system. So that distribution system and transportation, well, really their gathering systems have been developed, but not a transportation and distribution system, really.
Yeah, and then there are these concerns I was mentioning before in terms of transport and lack of national grid in China.
For natural gas. Yeah. Okay.
One thing I want to just emphasize the safety. I forgot the question. Well, long story short, when I worked at BP, people heard about the BP Texas City refinery, their explosion, like 50 people get killed. Okay, I'm this close get killed. Okay, so now the reactor was ISO. Its inventory. That reactor has 75,000 pounds of the stuff in there. It's basically gasoline type of liquid. So its inventory really causes safety issue. So you see the mushroom. So that's the conventional refinery. Now in modular production, your productivity high, you produce, then you ship. So you don't have enough, you don't keep enough inventory. From safety standpoint view, it's the same. So that's what I mean. I've tried to compare with conventional refinery. You don't have enough of the volume in there. So
I was just interested also that instrument that you're not going to have very much success in utilizing it appropriately when you get it there.
Yeah.
So I don't know, is there experience with the modular units in terms of their reliability?
Well, that's the beauty of a modular device. You basically build the several unit operation in one. As I said, your reactor, as you mentioned, is a highly exothermic. But you manage the heat. It's not trapped heat. You get heat away when you produce heat. So when the liquid coming out, you already do the heat changing. So the liquid coming out is at the ambient temperature. So that's the one thing. True. You mentioned about the BTU value of a liquid. It's always the issue of any production because these things are flammable. So all you need to deal with is just make sure they don't catch fire. So that feature, conventional modular is the same thing, the nature of a liquid. But in terms of the safety, in terms of heat, it's well managed in the modular reactor. That's why you want to take advantage of this modular, so-called design of modular device to integrate them together.
But that brings up another point in terms of, if you use it in one place and then you pack it up and you ship it over the roads, and we know the roads in Morgantown are pretty bumpy, and then you have this equipment and pipe joints and valves and things that get shifted around, and then you put it down in the next place. You have to do a lot of pressure testing and make sure that And that was another
That's
point you're
true.
making, and I think that's something really important to.
Yeah, that's true.
keep in
You
mind.
always need, well, anywhere you put them, this module together, it's not one module, it's 2 or 3 module. You ship from one location to another, you always do need to do commissioning. Yeah, that's
Right.
true. Yeah.
So you have to recommission every time.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah. Pradeep,
So, Paolo, this is a question for you. So in the US, in the last few years, we've seen have this huge issue with all kinds of particulates, 2.5 microns and so on and so forth, pretty much affiliated with coal fired power plants. So what is the ratio there? I mean, do you think, where are they now and what's the projection? In other words, is natural gas going to be displacing coal or do you still far?
So thank you for your question. But to zoom out a little bit on this topic, it's important to acknowledge that there was an important treaty which is going to be actually officially signed this month on the 22nd in New York, which was the result of the COP21 in Paris and the agreement that was prepared, the floor to the agreement in Paris for the climate change conference was prepared by the joint US-China collaboration for climate change mitigation and adaptation and collaboration between US and China that was essential to reach an agreement later in Paris in November and December. So if we remember this as a picture, general picture on the backstage, we expect that China has to make a planning and shift, like also Obama was trying to do, and before the death of Antonin Scalia, Supreme Court judge, the planning of Obama was blocked by the Supreme Court. So we don't know what is going to happen now with potential new judge, but probably if he will be able to get a closer judge than Scalia, probably this planning for respect of the commitments in Paris will move on, will move forward. And the attempt is not, of course, it's unrealistic to consider that we would phase out completely coal or even completely phase out fossil fuels. Of course, it's completely unrealistic. But the attempt is to try to take in serious consideration the other side of the coin, so the risk. So as US is doing, considering the challenges that China has to face, I do believe that slowly there will be this shift, which is of course a paradigm shift even more for China that just in the last few years has constantly opened new power plants, new coal industries, even in the Hebei region, even in the capital of Beijing, with the air pollution and the problem of air pollution that we all know. So I do believe, yes, that China, considering all these external factors, but even more important, the internal factor, the health of his own citizen and his own politician being in Beijing, will change, will move on in a direction that will take in consideration this. How it will be done, that's a completely a different story, because if we shift from burning coal and polluting the air to drilling with not sufficient good technology, with risk for geological challenges or risk for the water, we are simply hiding the problem, shifting the problem to another side. So I do believe, and I repeat what I said before, that external collaboration from US, or particular from US, for the important track records on shale gas and natural gas development, collaboration with China is certainly very important.
So China, in terms of production, roughly 80% coal generation capacity. The balance is nuclear, hydro, solar, and wind, effectively. And we know China is actually building nuclear power plants at a faster rate than the United States is, for certain. And for those of you who don't know, China has pledged to cap, to max, the maximized emissions for CO2 will be hit in 2030, meaning they're giving themselves some room to keep increasing the CO2 emissions, but for 2030 to be the maximum production or maximum CO2 emission year. They are actually on target to hit that a little early, as a matter of fact. And over the last year, there have been a couple of announcements, joint announcements between the U.S. and China. President Xi was in Washington in September, again a couple months ago. And the joint announcements between our president and the Chinese president actually included some projects that we work on here at WVU, including the Climate Change Working Group and the U.S.-China Clean Energy Research Center. And so we are, firmly embedded in this conversation. And so I think that when you hear the discussion in China in terms of the commitment to reducing the CO2 footprint and hitting its max in 2030 or earlier, and then decreasing its emissions, it's taken very seriously as a national priority, and so it's very interesting. So unfortunately, we're out of time for this forum of discussion. But if we move down the hallway, we have refreshments and imbibements, and we have the opportunity. You can ask questions one-on-one, and then it looks like Trina may have one more announcement.